Yep.
Alright. First 3-gun practice with Q-Sun. Type 81. Non-restricted. Oh, I gotta take it off safe.
There we go. Alright. Shooter ready.
Go home, GI!
Stand by.
Toma!
What is this American piece of shit? I don't need this.
What the? Toma! Howdy there folks. In this video I'm going to be showing you how I clean the corrosive residues out of my firearms after shooting corrosive ammo. Now I know there's already a whole bunch of videos like this on YouTube, but I kind of figured since I have to clean this gun anyways because I was shooting her the other day with corrosive ammo, I figured I'd just film the process just to put more content on my channel, as well as in case some of you out there are curious on how I do this, there'd be this video so you can see the process. Now, the way I do this is going to be very similar to a lot of the videos on YouTube in the sense that I do use water, hot water, to flush out the corrosive salts, like to neutralize it. However, there's going to be some interesting spin-offs that I do that may interest you guys, one of which being is this particular oil, which I'll get to in a little bit, that I use during the flushing process. So yeah, we'll get right into this. The rifle that I'm going to be cleaning today is Q-Sun. So she is a semi-automatic only, Type 81 SA. She is non-restricted here in Canada and is chambered in 7.62x39. I got videos about her and there'll be more videos to come about her. So if you're interested in that, feel free to check out the rest of the videos on my channel. So as far as items go for this cleaning process, there's so many things to point out. I'm not going to list them off right now. I'm just going to go through the process, and as I go I'm going to tell you what each item is that I use. So you'll have to watch the whole video to kind of get an idea for what all I used for this process. But as far as the first step goes, I'm going to disassemble the firearm. So for disassembly of the firearm, the first thing you're going to want to do, of course, like everybody says, make sure the firearm is unloaded. I've already done that, so it's safe to disassemble. I'm just going to start breaking down the firearm as far as I figure is required to get a thorough cleaning of all the parts on this gun. And what I'm doing is I'm going to be laying all these parts out on the table, and then I'll sift through them afterwards, kind of putting aside the ones that are going to be cleaned in different ways than the other. Those of you who have seen my Type 81 review video, you'll probably remember me commenting on how I like to take this lower handguard off so I can get at the barrel and other components of the firearm in this area, since I find the gas does circulate around in here. So if I didn't take the handguard off and clean underneath there, I'd be quite concerned that it would rust underneath there over time. Luckily for me, in this particular case, I only shot probably about 40 rounds through this firearm, so she's not absolutely filthy. But of course, you know, even if you fire 2 rounds of corrosive ammo through your firearm, I find it's very good practice to clean the firearm regardless, because any amount of residue is a potential risk. So like pretty much everybody else on YouTube, I am going to be using water to clean this firearm. And I'm just going to use simple tap water. However, because I'm located here in Alberta, this is going to be nice glacier water. Only the best for my firearms. I have found cooking the water, like heating it up to the temperature I want it to be really easy using this type of kettle. It's one of these electric kettles that you plug into plug into the wall, and then it heats the water up to boiling temperatures. It's really handy for doing that, because then your wife or the female in the house isn't going to be complaining at you for using her cooking gear to warm up your water for cleaning your guns. And these are dirt cheap. I purchased this for as little as $12 from Walmart, so very handy. Alrighty, so we're just going to leave it right here. Plug her in, and voila. This is going to start warming up for us while we do some other stuff here. Alrighty. So for this water cleaning process, I am going to be using this pail, this little tea kettle thing, camping kettle, and this funnel, and of course this, which I'm going to get into shortly. Now the pail is simply going to be something I set on the floor here to collect all the water that I flushed the gun with, and also to let the parts soak with. This kettle, the only reason I use this is I guess I'll explain what this is, because this is that part. What I like to do that's quite different from most people online is I like to mix my water with a water-soluble cutting oil. So this is a Power Fist brand cutting oil that's water-soluble, so when you pour it into the water, it dissolves into the water, and it's extremely cheap. I purchased this jug for like $10 from Princess Auto, and it's huge. I use this for a lot of things. I use this for this process as well as a preservative kind of heavy oil for the cosmetic parts of the firearm, like just the non-action parts of the firearm. So the reason why I use this tea kettle is I found if I pour this cutting oil direct into the kettle that I plug into the wall, this oil kind of like cakes onto the heating element and it wrecks the kettle. So what I've adopted now, after wrecking a kettle already, good thing it's only $12, is I pour the oil into this tea kettle. You don't have to do much. That's a lot. But just a little bit like that. And then I'll pour the hot water into that and now mix it. And then once it's mixed, it'll be ready to start pouring into the firearm and flushing all the parts with. So that's set up. And the funnel, I'm going to be simply using to channel the water down into the breech, the chamber, and barrel of the firearm, and other various parts without spilling it all over the place. That's all this is for. Alright, so as you can see there, the water is definitely heating up. In the meantime, generally while letting that heat up, what I'll be doing is wire brushing the bore of the firearm. So to do this, you can see I just got this real cheap 3-piece cleaning rod that I bought from Bass Pro. I only got this just because it's convenient. It fits in my MTM box here. And on the end of it, I got a simple wire 30 cal brush. What I'm going to do is just simply insert it into the bore and make a bunch of passes. While I'm doing this, when I insert it, I'm going to guide it by hand very carefully that I don't nick the crown. Many of you will probably be commenting, oh, you should be using a crown, like a brush starter, or whatever the heck you call them. I mean, that's certainly good practice, but I find if I'm careful, I usually don't concern myself with that. And none of the guns I clean this way are usually that precise with a firearm anyways, so this is how I do it. Judge me all you may. While I'm doing this, of course, I'm not holding the rod. I'm letting the rod spin with the rifling. So I'm going to just do this a handful of times. Another good practice, if you don't want to damage the crown, is to simply do this from the chamber side of the rifle. And a lot of these milsurp rifles will actually have the slot cut or milled into the receiver to allow a cleaning rod to pass through, like so. The Type 81 does have that feature. You have to push in this little button and swing the stock out of the way, and there's a hole for it, but I find that's so much pissing around for something I could just accomplish like this. But the option is there. So I'm going to call it good, especially since I only fired 40 rounds out of this thing. I'm sure if you fired like hundreds, you might, I don't know, your mileage may vary. You might want to scrub it more than that. So after doing that, the rifle is pretty much ready to flush. And my water has already boiled and the kettle is turned off. So what I'm going to do is carry this rifle over here. Oh, there's one part I'm missing. Just for my convenience, I like to use this wedge block from my case, my NTM case. And I will put the firearm barrel first down to the pail, and then I'll kind of lean the stock up against this table here, and then wedge the stock into this block like so. That just stabilizes it, sort of. It's still kind of tippy, and that's why I just got to be careful when I'm doing this, not to knock the gun and pail full of water over. So there you go, that's propped up and ready for the flushing process. Alright, I'm going to let this get right up to a boil. Shouldn't take long. While it's doing that, I'm going to explain why I use this oil, because many of you are probably asking that question. What I found is flushing my firearms with the boiling water, the conventional way, just using straight water. What I was discovering is occasionally I would get flash rust occurring during the process of finishing flushing the barrel and then drying all the water from the barrel and other components of the gun, and the flash rust would form on all the bare surfaces of metal, on the various parts and whatnot. And to avoid that, I actually started taking the machinist course at a local college here. And of course, in the machining industry, we tend to use cutting oil for a lot of things dissolved into water. And one of the reasons why you do that is simply because it acts as kind of like a preservative, like it keeps bare metal from flash rusting. It does a lot of things, but that's one of the advantages of doing it, or using this type of oil. So I thought, why not try to do that with combine that kind of technology with this process of flushing these guns. So I started doing this, dissolving water-soluble cutting oil into my flush mixture, and after doing that, I've never experienced flash rust in my firearms since. So I don't know, it's still a work in progress. Like, I haven't. It's something I would only recommend if you think you want to try it, but it's something I know I've been doing, and so far it seems to be working, so I continue to do it this way. Now, let me get this cord out of the way here. So you can see I just mixed it in with the water, and it turns this milky color. And what I'm doing is I'm just letting it slowly flow through the barrel. Now before I run out of this mixture, I am going to flush other things, so I'm going to purposely spill it around the locking lugs on this action, like so. That does make a bit of a mess, but I mean, you do want to kind of try to, the corrosive residues will be on other parts of the firearm besides just the bore, right? So I like to try to use this to neutralize it. But then I'm going to descend down to the gas block here and flush that as well. And while I'm at it, I'll kind of let the front sight soak too, because sometimes, especially the Type 81, because the gas kind of just goes everywhere on the front end, you do get a little bit of residue on the front sight. So I don't want those threads and stuff rusting up on me in the front sight, because then the sight will be too stiff to adjust. Another advantage of having the bore in the pail like this is that as you can see the barrel starts to submerge quite a bit. And so that's handy if you have a muzzle brake on the firearm. So that muzzle brake will be submerged in the water, and that will neutralize all the hard to reach places in the muzzle brake. So there you go, I'm out. Even though I got the cutting oil dissolved into this water to prevent flash rusting, I still like to use boiling hot water, simply because it gets the metal really hot, and that helps to, once I'm done here, like you see, all the little like just wet parts on the firearm tend to evaporate a lot quicker, just because the metal is so hot, right? It just helps the gun dry better. That's the only reason why I use hot water. Now, I'm just gonna go ahead and let that kind of sit like that. And what I'm gonna do is go over here and start grabbing certain parts I want to submerge completely. So this is going to be generally parts that don't have wood pieces attached to them, of course, because you don't want to soak your wood. That can damage the wood greatly. And I'm not going to submerge parts that will have clean areas that I'll be worried will be hard to get at with, like to get rid of the water. So a magazine, for instance, I will not submerge this in that solution, because that means there's going to be water on the spring in here and stuff, and that might be a nightmare to get out or to dry out, despite it having this oil on it, you know. So something like this, you'll see how I clean later. But definitely things like this gas piston, in it goes. Springs. This doesn't get that dirty on a Type 81, so I'm not going to submerge that. This is the dust cover. It does get dirty, but rather than soaking it in there and it doesn't even fit in the pail fully, I'll show you how I clean that. Same way I clean these. So those are the parts that I'm going to let soak. Now, while I let those parts soak, I'm going to go ahead and dry off the barrel assembly, like the rest of the gun basically. So, the tool I use to help dry this off is a air compressor. There's plenty of other ways to do this for those of you who don't have air compressors, but really, if you're any sort of a gun enthusiast or just love tinkering in a shop in general, if you don't have an air compressor with an air nozzle on it, you should honestly, your next gun purchase should be canceled and you should buy a freaking air compressor. Like seriously. This is gonna get really loud, so rest in peace, headphone users. So after blowing it out, what I'll immediately do is I'll take my Hops 9 lubricating oil and I'll quickly spray a bunch of this down the bore and all over the areas that I got wet. The reason why I do this is all to prevent that flash rust, right? Because the last thing you want is your firearm to rust from the cleaning process. You can see I'm going to squirt it in the front sight area, in the gas block. I'm getting really generous with it because, I mean, you want it to just cake, like go everywhere to prevent that rust. Now that I've done that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start cleaning the barrel out with 30 cal cleaning patches. So to do this, I don't have the proper jag to push the patch through the barrel. So what I do is pretty ghetto. I actually just use the cleaning rod itself to push the jag through. And what I'll do for this process is I will use this Hops 9 gun bore cleaner. I use this stuff simply because it removes a lot of the copper fouling in the barrel. It's just good stuff to use for your barrel. It's probably not necessary, but that's what I use. And I'm going to be putting on gloves for this part. Okay, so now I got my gloves on. I take this Hops 9. I'm just simply going to soak a rag as you can see. Now, people have used this solvent know it has a particular smell, but I know I could never pinpoint what exactly it smells like because it's so particular. But my girlfriend actually pointed out one day, she was helping me clean a firearm, that to her it actually smells a lot like fake banana. And I actually was quite amused by that because I kind of figured that has to be about the closest comparison I've ever heard to like kind of coming close to pinpointing exactly what this stuff smells like. It's not exact, but I think that's about as close of a real world item. It smells like this stuff. So as you can see, I just pushed it through the muzzle side once again, and it came out real disgusting. I'll just push a few of these through, and then what I'll do is I'll let it soak in the barrel. So you push these through fairly slowly to really, because what you're doing is you're trying to coat the barrel Now I'm going to let that sit. So in the meantime, while I'm letting that sit in the barrel and doing its work, what it does, I'm going to go around all the extremities and inside with this firearm with a wet shop rag. So you can see here I got my wet rag. It's soaked with that stuff from the pail, so it does have the oil mixture in it. And now I'm just going to go along neutralizing all the areas where I feel the wire didn't do a good job. You don't want this absolutely soaked so it's dripping all over the place, because you know, then you start dripping cool water all over things. You know, you just want to try to keep the wire to a minimum. Enough to reduce the corrosive residue, but not enough to leave water in places there shouldn't be water and corrode the gun that way instead. Alrighty, so now that I've wiped down a lot of the parts on the firearm assembly here, the gun, I'm going to go ahead and put a dry patch through the bore, and we'll see what comes out. It should look blue if the thing did its job. There you go. So, I mean, it's not that intense because it wasn't that much ammo, but you can see there's a hint of blue. That's copper. Stuff coming from the rifling. And some of that would be coming from this clean rod as well because it's brass. Anyways, so what I'll do after cleaning the bore out is I'll just continue on sending a few more of these down the bore with it's just soaked in this lubricating oil. This Hops 9 lubricating oil. Just a little bit. I'll do that a few times. And then to finalize that process, when I feel the bore is fully cleaned, I will send a final patch down through the barrel coated with this this cutting oil, straight, no mixture, just straight up cutting oil. And the reason why I do that is I find I really like it because it's a heavy oil, does a good job at preserving the metal inside the bore, and it's heavy and sticky enough that it stays there. I find if I usually lube up the bore with this stuff, after like a month of sitting around, the bore is dry. This stuff disappears somehow, or drips out, or whatever the heck happens. Where if I use this cutting oil, it stays in there the whole time. And the con of doing it this way is if you do leave your bore oily like that, especially with this heavy oil, you'd be really smart to always remember before you whip your gun out and start shooting it at the range to run a bore snake or something through the bore to clear out the film of oil. I always do that. It's like a first process for me whenever I fire any of my guns, is I always snake the bore. So, but that's something to keep in mind if you do adopt this way of cleaning your gun, to do that. So, as you can see by these patches here, I just sent patch after patch through the bore until I eventually, you know, it started to look like this. And usually I tend to find if the patch looks like this, I consider it pretty much clean for these surplus corrosive ammo firing guns. I mean, you can send I've found that you can send like 50 of these damn things through the bore, and it'll take forever for it to get much cleaner than that. And then I put the final patch through it with the heavy cutting oil to preserve the bore, which isn't a huge deal on a lot of these guns because they got a chrome line bore, but you know, I just like to be really thorough. As you can see, I'm quite anal about my cleaning process. So now the next step is to deal with these parts that we've left soaking in this mixture for all this time. So what I do is I just whip the part out and then I wipe it down with this wet rag. What I'm doing here is just wiping the residue, you can see that was dirty, off the part. I just set it down, I fish around for another part. Here's a spring, pretty hard to wipe off, so it just comes out. The water's pretty damn hot, so you want to keep your time fishing around in it for parts to a minimum. So now for these parts that I talked about earlier, These are going to be cleaned very much the way you saw I cleaned the extremity of the firearm. So that is simply taking this wet rag and just making sure it's not soaking, and just wiping the parts that got a little dirty. But not enough, like especially on the mags here. I don't want dripping water, because then the water is going to run down inside the mag and possibly cause a rust problem. Luckily it does have that oil on, so, but I don't trust this oil method 100% enough to leave water like this just sitting on the parts. I honestly haven't tried to see what happens if I do that, so I don't trust it, even though in theory it could work. So same thing, just wipe it down a bit, and there you go. So now I'm pretty much done with this. Cast that off to the side, and I want a dry piece of cloth. I like to use these rags, even though they're kind of pricey, simply because they don't leave fiber everywhere. If you can use paper towel, I find paper towel leaves like strands of fiber on the parts, and it's annoying. So now I just wipe the parts clean, like dry. And this process actually, I found, pretty much cleans them too. Like, now that I've wiped this off, as far as I'm concerned, this part's done. It's ready for an oiling and then put back on the gun. Now for these parts, I find it's usually pretty wise to actually take your handy dandy air compressor and just to piss off the headphone users. Clean out any water, or blast out any water residue that might be in there. And then go ahead and proceed to wiping it dry. There you go. Now, with the bolt itself, I find you're usually pretty wise to take the air compressor and blow the firing pin itself. See that? Maybe it picked up in the video, but a bunch of residue came out of there. And then I'll blow it the other direction. Basically, I work that back and forth a little bit, making sure there's not too much water, oily water in there. Maybe even inside the extractor. You couldn't see it, but a bunch of water came out, so it's good I did that. Same with the gas piston. So now that I've looked over all these parts, I've kind of brushed out and just wiped out all the dirty residue, leftover gunk. These are clean, ready to be oiled and put back onto the gun. So, for the first step of oiling, I'm going to use my Hops 9 lubricant to get into all these nooks and crannies. The reason for this is the reason why I use this stuff is it just flows really good, right? It's like liquid. I mean, it's like water almost, you know. You can put it in, spray it in a part and you'll know it will go into all the cracks and everywhere. Spray in there on the spring. There you go. Now here's my favorite part. I love using this cutting oil to do this, because the cutting oil, I just really love how you can oil this stuff and you can come back, open up your safe a month later, and the gun, all the parts are still oily. Like, it's just excellent preservative for the money. Like, it just does so many things. So that's why I'm really starting to love how I do this. Like, you can use it to flush out the gun, you can use it to oil the gun, preserve the gun. Just cake that bolt face so it gets in all the areas. Oh, that's the part that I forgot to oil. Shoot some of this Hops 9 up into the firing pin for sure, because then that's going to help guarantee that there's no corrosive stuff in there. Or if there is a little bit, the metal will already be protected from it, so it won't do anything. Okay, so pretty much the final oiling step here. I like to take that same oily rag and I wipe down pretty much every square inch of the firearm. Alrighty, so now everything's oiled, including the rifle itself. I'm gonna start throwing it together. I love how absolutely simple these Type 81s are to disassemble and clean. Such a minimalist rifle. So nice. There you go. So she is all clean, oiled super heavily. An absolute slime bucket. So, of course, rather than leaving it like this, what I'll do is take a nice dry towel rag after this, and I'll just go over the gun. Just wiping all this excess oil on the outside off. Alright, so that right there is how I clean my rifles after shooting corrosive ammo. Many of you might think what I did here is pretty over the top in ways of cleaning your rifle, but this is just how I do it. I like to be really thorough and really oil my guns. So anyways, I hope you found this video helpful, or at least some parts of it, or just at least enjoyable. So until next time, take care.
Where's the... Oh, there it is.